No way.
David Cameron, hear us say?
Protesters staged a demonstration outside the UK Prime Minister's residence in number 10 Downing Street. The demo called for an end to the war in Mali and North Africa. They opposed any intervention in Syria and said no to any attack on Iran.
We've now had over a decade of military intervention by the West in the Arab region. It's now spreading into North Africa. That this is an error. You were told by your own security services 10 years ago that the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq would spread the influence of the terrorists, not diminish it. And that's been absolutely true. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq a decade ago, but there is now. There was no Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, but there is now. There was no Al-Qaeda in Mali, but there is now. Surely it's time to draw the lesson that Western military intervention cannot be a solution to the problems of the region.
Only a few weeks ago, David Cameron announced that the UK pledged to send more troops and supplies into Mali. Activists believe the Prime Minister is dragging the country into another war reminiscent of the one in Afghanistan. They believe one of the government's aims is to get their hands on oil and natural resources.
There's a global struggle going on for influence in important parts of the world between the US and the Western powers on the one hand, China and other emerging powers on the other. And really what we're seeing in Africa is a kind of a horrible mirror image of what happened at the end of the 19th century, namely a scramble for Africa, a scramble for control by the very same colonial powers. That's the disgrace.
There are genuine fears that the growing tensions in Syria and the deployment of Western troops on the Turkish border will signal a long campaign of direct intervention and war in the region.
They're restrained from direct military large-scale intervention in Syria because there's a split among the major powers. Russia and China have exercised a veto in the Security Council, and because of the complexity of the situation on the ground. That doesn't mean to say that it can't change. They are very, very interested in getting to a point where there is a post-Assad regime in Syria which is pro-Western.
It was 10 years ago that the UK witnessed over 1 million protesters against the war on Iraq. And today's protests have the same message towards a government that has the same agenda as the one 10 years ago. The so-called war on terror seems to have reawakened with recent events. The slow spread of war and intervention across the Middle East and North Africa is becoming a huge concern for peace campaigners. They hope that this demonstration will remind the government of the people's opposition to continued foreign intervention. Hassan Al-Khatib, Press TV, London.